Hello and welcome to Linking Out Loud. I'm Rachel McHugh and today I'm joined by two of my very own colleagues from Distinctly, Matt Foster, Digital PR Manager, and Chloe Chamberlain, Senior Digital PR Strategist. Between them, they have years of digital PR experience, and we're going to be talking all about AI in the context of digital PR. So integrating it into your existing processes, what it means for the industry, and some tips and tricks along the way. So stay tuned for that. In fact, Matt Foster was recently named one of Agency Hacker's top AI innovators for 2024. So we're very glad to have him on the podcast to be talking about exactly that topic. Thank you very much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we get started, it would be good to have a bit of an introduction to yourselves and your experience in digital PR, as well as what got you thinking about AI.
As you were just saying in your gracious introduction, so I've been working in PR for just over a decade now, which seems crazy. But yeah, started in 2013, fresh out of university, worked up in Leeds for 3 years, and then moved down to Distinctly in 2016. Over that decade, I mean, agency life, you've got loads of hats on, as you well know. So working over clients in loads of different spaces, able to explore loads of different things. And yeah, then getting into the AI side of things, it was really at the start of, I mean, it's when it kind of became public knowledge in 2023, burst onto the scene, as it were. We got interested. We started having internal conversations about what we can do to adopt it into our processes, what the future of it's going to be, and all that kind of thing. And that was the start of our AI journey at Distinctly, which we'll talk more about in a second.
Nice. And Chloe, what got you into PR and your current involvement in all of the AI developments we've been going through at Distinctly?
So I've been working in digital PR for the last 3.5 years. I think I've always been really interested. I've always loved processes and going through them and finding kind of the best, most efficient way of working. And so I think that's probably what intrigued me with AI, is the fact that it's something that can just make things quicker and easier and be used as, like, not to sound too pretentious, as like a bit of a muse and something you can bounce off of. And yeah, so me and Matt got
The secret's out already.
I feel like we just need to address it.
Yeah.
Everyone here just refers to Matt Foster as Foz. So if you hear us referring to Foz by accident, that's because we don't really know who Matt Foster is.
no.
That was
He's just
weird.
Foz.
That first 5 minutes was weird for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a nice introduction to your sort of experience and your journey, as they say, in digital PR. You've kind of touched on it a little bit there, Matt. But when did you sort of start to realise, with the rise of AI and ChatGPT at the start, that this was going to be quite an important thing when it comes to what you do day to day and what you do for a living?
I mean, everything that we do in DigiPR is obviously it's with a foundation in what's happening in search engines. It's what's happening in the wider tech world. So it's pretty hard to get away from it if we know that Google's moving into this space and this is going to be a part of the SERPs, which again I'm sure we're going to delve into a little bit later. There needs to be an understanding from digital PR teams in terms of how that affects what we're doing and getting coverage and building links. And I mean, there's a whole wider part of the conversation on what publications are doing and how they're adopting AI into their processes for writing news stories. And yeah, so it touches on multiple points of what we're doing with digital PR. So yeah, we kind of realized, again, probably at the start of 2023 is when we started making moves towards understanding and kind of developing our policies and all that. So yeah, that was kind of the foundation of it. That was the root of it.
Nice. And in the last couple of months, you have launched and been talking quite a lot about a white paper that you've been working on here at Distinctly, that talks about all of the ways that you've attempted to integrate AI into the way that we work. Could you tell us a little bit more about exactly what that means in this context, why you looked into this, why you put it together, and what the purpose is?
So the AI white paper is Distinctly digital PR team going from day dot adopting AI processes. We go up to the last 6 months officially, but we go a little bit further than that when we look at next steps. And yeah, we outline what we've done over that last 6 months. We measure the understanding of the team, and we have a look into what's happening moving forward with AI.
Very nice. And what is the official title of your paper?
The official title is Integrating AI Processes into Digital PR.
Which is precisely what you've done and what we will be talking about today. Mm-hmm. So what are the overarching steps that you've taken or Distinctly has taken to try and implement AI and the relevant tools into our existing processes?
So we basically identified that in order for people to feel confident using AI, you need to practice it. But obviously, in an agency, your time is literally money. The client is paying for a certain amount of time to be used. So people obviously don't necessarily want to be using client time to be figuring out AI and how to develop that into their process. And I think as just humans, we can fall into, well, I've always done it this way. I know exactly how it works. This is what works, so I'll just do that because it's quicker than actually learning and like playing around with something brand new. So we assigned everyone some internal time and everyone had half an hour each Friday just to play around with it, let loose and see what happens. Each of those sessions was themed around a part of PR. So we had ones around ideation, around outreaching, around producing press releases, image generation, different things like that. And then we put all our findings into a deck and shared them in what worked, what didn't work. And in doing that, that has helped people feel more confident in the team and are more likely to use it on a kind of day-to-day basis because they've had that exposure. They know it works for when you're just wanting to quickly think of another headline or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of an overarching view of how we started to implement it, basically.
I think it's such a learning curve, right? Same with any tool or new process that you might be trying. The chances are if you try something new, you're not going to be great at it from the get-go.
Yeah.
So it might take you a bit longer to use it for writing press releases or for whatever it might be. So it can be very tempting to say, well, actually, it's quicker. I can just do it myself.
Exactly.
Without using AI. I know that it works because I've been doing this for my whole career. So why would I bother trying this tool? Like, I'm not convinced from the start. But there are definitely benefits to having something at your disposal that can do things like check your work and act, like you say, as a bit of a muse, and you can bounce ideas off of it. So you do need a bit of time set aside just for, I've heard it described as like playtime.
Yeah.
Where you can just test things. It doesn't matter. No one needs to see it. No one needs to be testing you on it, and just practice using it. And then you get better at it. So then when you are working on a client or you're working on a piece of content, whatever it might be, you have those skills in your arsenal already, and you're not wasting learning time when you're trying to be, when you're on the clock, basically, when you're on client time. So yeah, really, really valid.
That's kind of, just picking up on what you were just saying there, there's a large part of what we were doing with this adoption time was making sure that failure was a part of learning. And that was a real key thing that we had to communicate with the team all throughout this. And I suppose it's the same as anything that we do in DigiPR with like creating campaigns or testing things out, trying something. If it doesn't work, then that's fine, it's a learning. But making it a bit more structured in a way that we have time set aside for the team to work on, like we were just describing, and for each individual in the team, say if we're doing press releases or something, everyone in the team to just log what they've been testing out on ChatGPT. And then what we have at the end of that is 8 different attempts at doing something with press releases with ChatGPT or different LLMs or AI. And then talk about that as a team. And that's all part of the learning process. You mentioned about the white paper at the very start. The whole thing is kind of like a structured learning process that we've gone through. And the AI white paper is kind of the culmination of that structured learning process and measured learning process, actually. So hopefully people find it useful as if they're starting and wanting to adopt AI processes or adopt little bits into their DigiPR team, digital marketing team, or wider marketing team. And hopefully this kind of thing will be useful in just seeing how another agency has done it, and yeah, maybe they can use it to apply to their own.
For sure. You've essentially put together a bit of a guide on how you can, not necessarily how to use AI in your agency, but how to try it out and how to test it out to see how it works for your agency. So I'll link the white paper that you've put together in the description. And if anyone follows us on LinkedIn, you might have seen some posts about it recently, but it is a really useful resource for other agencies or if you're just curious about AI in general. And you touched on, or you mentioned there, Foz, that it's been a bit of a learning process, and it kind of documents how from day one to eventually trying to implement it more in the day-to-day, you've learned quite a few things. Are there any takeaways or things that you would have done differently perhaps, or you would advise another agency to do differently now that you've gone through the whole process?
I think probably just varying which I can't even say the acronym, LLMs. Which kind of AI that you use, because we were very much focused on ChatGPT. But in hindsight, kind of started playing around more with like Gemini and Claude, and obviously they're constantly updating and they have their different strengths for different use cases. So probably encouraging the team to not just use ChatGPT and actually start using some of the others and comparing where their strengths are at and what that looks like basically is probably where I would change that.
I agree with that, Chloe. I think that's a good point. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier today actually, and we've spoke about the workshops, and the workshops were kind of it was a quarterly thing, which we were able to use that as a measurement for how much that improved understanding. I think we should have continued the workshops past that, and I think that's something that we're probably going to look into doing on a more regular basis. I think with agency life, your time needs to be dedicated to client output and making sure that is the first port of call, and making sure quality output on that delivery, which I'm sure other agencies can relate to this, where that means some internal elements kind of slip down. So I think that's kind of what happened to the whole workshop process, which I'd be keen to get that back on the table and start talking as a group around how each individuals are using AI, and make sure that that's consistent across the team. Yeah,
just keeping that learning as an ongoing thing. You haven't mastered it yet.
Yeah, not even necessarily, I guess, learning, but in less of a structured format. Like we're still sharing different prompts that people can use and what's going on in the industry. It's just that, the half-hour workshops takes like backseat just where capacities are full and things like that. But yeah, I think that would be interesting, and probably seeing like, a few months on, how have people kept up with it, because obviously that regular check-in isn't as much there, or I guess a bit of accountability of where we'd have it as a meeting, that's not there anymore. So how are people kind of using that themselves, and whether that kind of our workshops kept a lasting effect. So that would be quite interesting to have a look at.
I guess everyone's sort of had the time to set the foundations of learning what it is to use AI within their work. Some people might be more inclined than others to carry that on into their day-to-day or whatever they're doing. So coming back to that and seeing who's kind of kept it up, who's maybe decided, okay, I've tried it, I've figured out loads of different things, I've had loads of advice, but actually when it comes to doing this task, I prefer to just do it myself or use a different tool or whatever. It kind of reminds me a bit of, what's that show? Snog, Marry, Avoid. You know how where they would do an extreme makeover, and then in like a few weeks' time they would check in and say, have they kept up the look? And then most of the time there'll be like something in the middle, and it's like, okay, we did a workshop on ideation, press release writing, email writing, or whatever it might be. You try all the different things, but actually I only want to use AI or ChatGPT, Claude, etc. for writing my emails, because I find that actually that's what it's really good at. So it feels like a really apt analogy if people get that reference. And now we've talked a lot about trying out AI, using it in our day-to-day, etc., using it for client work even, which I think begs the question around how far you would take this, and would clients have concerns around this? Because obviously they're paying for a service. Aren't you just going, hey, ChatGPT, write me a press release. And I think it's important to preface that by saying, no, we're not doing that. This is very much a tool that you're using in the same way you might Google things to find out answers to stuff. It's an aid in writing, creating, coming up with ideas, checking things. But ultimately, we are the PRs and we are the ones who are checking things at the end. That's very much how generative AI is intended to be used. Is that something that came up during your development of the AI process or during your exploration into AI for digital PR, the sort of concerns of clients?
I think there's always going to be uncertainties from some teams when something's new. But I think it's our responsibility to educate exactly what our processes are and be as transparent as possible for how we deliver the work. Our mindset is that we want to maintain the quality of our delivery at every level, and the real reason that we have taken this long process to adopt AI in the way that we have is to make sure that responsibility on quality delivery is there. So we wouldn't deliver anything with the support of AI that doesn't meet our standards. That would stop within the internal process. Mm-hmm. So really learning how the mechanisms work and understanding the flaws of using AI is important in this respect. Mm-hmm. When we've been going through this and at conferences and speaking to various different marketing people, I think they almost rely on agencies to be the innovators in this space to a large extent. Mm. They would look at their agencies for advice on, okay, how can we create a campaign which pushes the boundaries? So I don't really think marketing teams in general are closed to this kind of thing. I think they expect it from their agency partners, and they're looking for their agencies to offer advice into how it can be done. So yeah, that's the kind of approach that we've taken. But yeah, education is important on making sure the quality is there.
I think that's a nice way of looking at it. AI is not a secret. So if you're using ChatGPT or you're working out how Claude can make you get things done quicker, no one's going to be really shocked by that because everyone has access to it. It's free for the most part.
Exactly.
So, now is the time to start upskilling in that area before, well, I think this time has already come, but you start to think about it before everyone's in the same boat as you. How can you get a bit of a leg up, essentially?
Yeah, for sure.
I think also when it comes to concerns, one of the ways you can mitigate that is with something like an AI policy, which is what you have been working on or have worked on. It's now complete and it's something that we have at Distinctly. So how can you use something like an AI policy to make sure that companies are using AI responsibly?
The AI policy is basically the framework for everyone to operate from. Without clarifying that framework from the very start, we felt like it would be too chaotic in terms of the type of innovation that was happening, in terms of the way that people were using it, or maybe assessing the quality of the output. That was I think it was phase one. In the first 3 months, it was the thing that we wanted to focus on, developing and making sure that was correct from the start. So, like I was saying there, that the AI use policy is really just a way of making sure the team are all working from the same sheet. There's a saying in there somewhere. Singing from the same hymn sheet, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Making sure that output is of the right quality, making sure that people know that if they are unsure, then they ask questions to the relevant people in-house. Key thing is making sure that humans are the be-all and end-all when talking about judging output. So nothing will go out without there being sign-off, and even internally, a human should. It's weird talking about humans and robots in this way, but this is how we phrased it because it is that weird. It is that futuristic that humans are. Humans need to have sign off internally. So yeah, it's part of making sure these processes are in place right from the very start, so we know what we're working with when we develop these things.
Yeah. I think it's also just a good way to make sure that your team feels confident in using AI, because I think you know where the boundaries are then, like what to do, what not to do, and you can kind of then play within those boundaries, and you know you're not sharing like client information that you don't want to do and different things like that. So it just means that people can have more guidance on how to use it, essentially.
Yeah, I hadn't necessarily thought of it in that way. It's not just rules on don't use it for this, don't use it for that.
Yeah.
It says you can use it for these things and maybe don't use it for those things. And then within that, you know that if you're abiding by that, then what you're doing is okay, essentially. So the AI policy that we have at Distinctly is there's obviously elements specific to digital PR and reference to SEO and that sort of thing. But a lot of it is quite broad. So you mentioned making sure everything has sign off and is checked by a human, that sort of thing, which would apply just to any old business, essentially. With that in mind, would you say that implementing AI, using more AI, is something that you'd recommend to any business? Is it something that any company can integrate?
I mean, it's definitely something that any company can integrate. It's almost like when computers first started coming about in. I mean, I was maybe just born then, but yeah, it's probably like when computers first started coming into the office. It's something where there's a relatively small shift happening now, which is only set to get bigger. Like, it's a different way of interacting with computers and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's going to be necessary for most companies to get at least an understanding of this, which is why we want to advise clients on best use and how we're using it, like I was saying with the education side. When it comes to digital PR teams specifically and SEO teams using this, I think I've already mentioned that it's crucial, really. It's understanding the search landscape, which we need to know about. That's our bread and butter. That's what we're operating on. I was going to go into some big future prediction then, but maybe I don't. Is there
get on tape and then we can revisit it like a time capsule in 10 years.
That's what I was thinking. What was I going to say? I was going to say that I think in a good few years, marketing teams might actually be paying a premium for human-based PR and human-based activity, which is not inconceivable. But speaking to various people in the industry and speaking to businesses about AI and longer-term goals, it might well be that they would rather pay the premium for human-based interaction. So I don't think that's ever going to be lost, is basically what I'm trying to say. And I don't think it ever should be lost. But I think there's the space for AI when it comes to creating campaigns long in the future to deliver a campaign feasibly to a company at a cheaper rate. That's not really the space that we're playing in or want to play in, because we're looking at quality of service and a really bespoke service to the campaigns and understanding the company that we're working with. But I don't know. This is my hot take on what's going to happen in the next decade.
Yeah.
So
just to add to that, we're kind of back to the original question as well, is even if you're at a company that's not necessarily using AI for your own internal purposes, at the end of the day, the vast majority of companies have websites, and the fact that AI has been integrated into the SERPs means that your business is affected by it. So there needs to be some level of understanding, just so you know how people are interacting with AI overviews in the SERPs.
Just to add to that, we kind of talked about when did you start to think that this was going to be a thing and to start paying attention to it. And at the beginning, it was all a bit of guesswork.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, like, using ChatGPT wasn't that great. People weren't that familiar with what prompts needed to look like.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a leap of faith to say, I want to dedicate some time to learning more about this and practicing using this perhaps. But we've sort of steered towards that being worth spending the time, essentially, because it's just getting more and more prevalent. And now you can't even avoid it. If you go to Google something, the AI search is usually or oftentimes what comes up first. So you're right. If you've got a website, even if you don't realize it, you're somehow affected by the fact that AI is such a cool part of search.
Yeah.
Cool. So most of what we've talked about so far has been around using AI within the processes that you have already. So you already write press releases or pitches and emails and you do ideation. How do we make that faster, more efficient, better by using AI? And we just kind of started to lean in there to the side of AI that's going to affect everything outside of the day-to-day. Like, how is AI going to affect the industry and what doing PR means and what we're trying to achieve with that? Same with like, how is it going to affect journalism, which inherently affects PR because that's who we're contacting. So the question is, with AI becoming so popular now, and also, as we've said, it being so prevalent in the searches now, in the SERP, I should say, what do you think that means for the future of PR, whether it's like the imminent future or the long-term future?
I think something I've been saying for a little while now, but I think that we'll probably see a bit more of a focus on kind of traditional campaigns and having an on-site that the AI overview can pick up and link to. So then not only will, in the ideal world, not only will AI overviews link to your client or your company's website with that information, but it's also linking to news sources of your news and your campaign. And it just means that you're kind of getting your client or your brand to the very top, not easily, but in a very quick way that you wouldn't necessarily be able to achieve if it was just organic, that you were focusing on improving rankings and things. It's almost like having paid media, except you're not having to pay for it unless you're working with an agency, in which case you are paying your PR team. But
not directly. Yeah. So is what you're talking about there what you might call AIO? AI optimization, because now instead of a featured snippet, you might just be getting an AI overview box. So you're talking about how by having a campaign with an on-site, that's now a data source, not only that the journalists might include in their article, but also that AI might pick up on if people are searching for similar things.
Yeah, exactly that. And the fact that Ahrefs and other spaces, Google Analytics and things, have started to show referral traffic from large language models, that it just becomes slightly easier to track, and you're kind of saying, okay, well, there have been this many searches from ChatGPT where a link to our campaign has come from. So you know that it's driving traffic and it is appearing at the top of SERPs and things. I think what will also be interesting to look at is any coverage that you get, whether it's for reactive or campaigns, having a look at that in Ahrefs or Moz or whatever people prefer to use, and seeing if that piece of coverage has come up in any ChatGPTs or Google Gemini or anything, and just see, well, okay, we can see it's come up in ChatGPT or Gemini, and we can see that we've not had this much referral traffic from The Sun, for instance. Obviously, we haven't got data yet on the anchor text and like searches that people are using in I can't say it at all. In LLMs, in AI chat box. So we do have to do a little bit of, not necessarily guesswork, but try and fit the pieces together without being explicitly told, this is what people are searching for, this is why you're coming up in AI results, and being able to kind of reverse engineer it from there, which obviously is what optimization is all about.
Yeah, and this is very much just the beginning, I think.
For sure.
In terms of seeing, the AI overview sort of results in Google, but also thinking about needing to optimize not just for SEO, but for these sort of snippets that are so AI-led. And you're right, we don't have the data on that yet, but we can kind of assume, I guess, to a degree, that most of the searches that will get an AI overview response will be more informational.
Yes.
So it will be those kinds of search terms that people are using, because it's still in Google.
Yeah.
You oftentimes aren't even trying to get an AI response. You just want to Google something, and that's just what it feeds you.
But that's where we come into it really with DGPR, isn't it? Because it's whenever we, if we create campaigns to sit on the client website or on associated pages, it tends to be informational. And if we want to, like a really nice end goal with any of our campaigns is for it to eventually get an actual pickup through appearing in the SERPs. So it's similar in a way to featured snippets. Featured snippets used to be the big thing. So it's just a changed search landscape, really. If we used to report to our clients about the number of featured snippets and the improvement in organic traffic that led to, it's now having a look at, okay, how many referrals are you getting from ChatGPT, for example? What does that mean in terms of the amount of exposure that they're getting on AI? And I'm sure there's but yeah, that's the game we're playing now when it comes to AI. And what we actually spoke about, things like, is it beneficial? This is slightly out there, but to have things like putting press material on websites, for example, as in, is it something where companies will increasingly need to own their own newsroom and their own news resources? So LLMs recognize that the news is coming from the client rather than from the news publications or other sources. Because we've seen things where we've put news out there, we've gained coverage for that campaign, and then that's been covered on a rival client website as a news piece, and then that's been appearing in AI search results, which is a bit backwards. So it's trying to understand exactly why would the LLMs look at the rival company page as the page that owns that news. I think it quoted a news source as in a publication as well as a rival company website as two citations. So it's things like that we're just trying to get a grasp of exactly how it's working. How can we address that? How can we make sure that LLMs are recognizing us as the source of the news? So yeah, all conversations that we're having with the SEO team, because it's not just the DGPR team that needs to work on this. It's the agency as a whole.
Yeah,
completely. And luckily, within digital marketing, we are no strangers to a changing search landscape. So it's just part of the deal, isn't it? And this just happens to be a really quite drastic change that no one really knows necessarily the answers to yet.
Yeah, another point that I was going to say on that, actually, that I just remembered, talking about changing search landscape, the helpful content update, the recent update from Google, one of the recent updates, moved onus onto making sure expertise was pushed forward on a client website, that the content that was produced on a client website had associated spokespeople. And you could maybe say that was a step towards what's happening with AI. If they're looking to feature content from websites in AI overviews, it seems a reasonable assumption that Google's thinking is that, okay, if we're going to get to point X, then we need to make sure that these things are in line and private companies know that this is important from now on. So the whole thought leadership space might become more important in making sure that we're serving AI results moving forwards. Making sure that qualified individuals are proofing copy that needs to be proofed, like medical stuff or legal stuff.
What's crazy as well is just how quickly this is all kind of turned around. I remember first using ChatGPT at Distinctly. It must have been, I was still in the old Rickmansworth office, so it must have been quite 3 years ago now, maybe. And being like, oh my gosh, this new thing that I've just tried for the first time, and I ask it a question and it gives me a whole
Yeah.
article about it. It's crazy. But it feels like now we're so much more au fait with that. But there are still people that are figuring it out for the first time. Like my sister came home the other day and her and my mum were talking about it, just saying, have you used ChatGPT? I was like, yeah, obviously. Like, use it all the time. But they're kind of new to it. I think for my younger sister, she started working like 9 months ago. So before then, like, why would you really use it properly? So that was her first open door to AI. And now she's on that journey of, she's on that journey to figuring out AI and using it in your day-to-day.
Welcome to the journey. Send her the white paper.
Yeah.
There was information, there was some data coming from ONS. They regularly do a business insight survey, which is very useful from a DGPR perspective. And they change the questions every quarter, every half year. One of the sections that they've started doing is around AI and AI adoption. And the insights that were revealed, I'm going to call it revealed, in September was the majority of information and communication professionals or information and communication businesses don't use AI.
Wow.
So actually, when we're talking about this, I think it can be quite easy as an agency, as a digital marketing agency. We spend our lives on sitting at a computer and experimenting with these things. But when we think about information and communication companies as a whole, the majority don't use it. I think is just the majority. I think it's 51% don't use AI in their day-to-day. But actually, if we zoom out a bit further than that, information and communication professionals were way above all other companies in terms of AI use. So when we're speaking to marketing teams in other industries, which mostly we are, it's just not a thing in their day-to-day. It's not something that they're familiar with. They might have, like you were saying, they might have played around with ChatGPT and asked it to write the article. But when it comes to actual uses for it, it's just not part of their processes. So we need to be conscious of that as professionals when we're speaking to our clients.
Yeah, that's very true. I've only really noticed in the last actually few months of clients actually bringing up AI and asking me about it more explicitly. I think it's probably come around with Google Analytics implementing it into kind of reporting and stuff. Clients have said, would be really interested to know exactly how AI overviews are interacting with our websites and campaigns, and like to see more data on that, essentially, which we can definitely do and start to implement on a more regular basis now that we have the tools to do so. I think you can kind of get stuck into a bit of an echo chamber, and where you're just talking to digital marketing agencies all the time. Everyone's like, yeah, like we know so much, and it feels a bit of that some things can be like, well, yeah, of course everyone knows that. And then as soon as you start to look at it as a wider industry and you move out of the digital marketing space, you start to realise that actually what we think of as everyone knows this inherently, people don't necessarily, because it's just not necessarily on their radar to be concerned about yet.
And it kind of quite nicely comes back round to what we were talking about at the beginning with, if you don't have the time to test something, practice it, just use it for the sake of using it, you're probably not going to get that familiar with it, because people have just such ingrained ways of working. So we're really lucky that we've had, because we kind of recognise it as being something quite important to what we do in a very specific way, we've dedicated that time to upskilling when it comes to using AI, writing prompts, and trying to find those tips and tricks that we can implement in our everyday. So then, having practiced or having done your workshops, what are some of the things that you use AI for, maybe that are a bit less obvious?
Probably the thing I use it most for on a very regular basis is headlines and subject lines. I think when you've been writing a press release for a few hours, or you've been switching between different tasks, it can be quite easy for your creativity to kind of start to evaporate. So I quite like to pop a headline in that I've already produced and just ask ChatGPT or Gemini to give me 5 alternative headlines, and then using that to kind of spark a bit of creativity and be like, oh, I quite like that phrasing. I can mix this with this and start to play around with it a bit like that. I like to think of it as like another person that you can just bounce ideas off of, rather than just being like, I like that headline, copy and paste from AI, done. More just using it to kind of bounce some ideas off of and see what starts flowing, basically.
It's kind of in little ways. It's to improve the little things, like just to make it easy. Like call notes is a very good use of it, which actually I think we could do more of. But absolutely, I think call notes needs to be rolled out fully across the company, just to take that admin side out of it. Something that we've developed recently is having a specific prompt for press release proofing, I should say. Writing press releases with AI can kind of be a bit clunky and maybe a bit pointless sometimes, because I think you end up changing a lot of it anyway. But when it comes to proofing, when it's simple things like just English language, spelling, I think that's a very good use of it and a very effective use of it. So having a prompt across the whole team, which team members can change the target publications, so it can advise on tone, it can advise on spelling, it can advise on making sentences more concise, things that are a bit more definite, rather than writing a press release, which is a bit more subjective. I think as a general rule, that's what we're shooting for with AI.
Yeah. Also, something I just thought of as well, but actually something that's just so simple, it just takes the admin time out of, is when you've got a data set, for instance, you've got all the different local councils and you want to know what region each of them are in, is to be able to copy and paste a list of locations and just ask it to tell you which region each of them is in, and to put it into CSV files, so you can just easily drop it into your Google Sheets or Excel or something, which is just really useful and just not time consuming, and you don't have to keep Googling where each place is and what region it is. So that is something that I actually really enjoy doing. It's just one of those little ways that can help speed up your day.
Handy dandy tip. I like it. And with all your prompts, do you have somewhere central that you house all of them, or do you just kind of keep to your own?
Yeah. So actually, after we created the workshops, we then got everyone to go and put the prompts they liked most into a prompt bank, which is just a Google Sheet full of all these different prompts, and each of them are labelled into kind of what category they fall under. So whether it's a prompt for ideation or for press release writing or writing in general, or lots of different things. I give so many examples, but and then it means that if you're wanting one for press release writing, you just quickly filter it and you've just got all your different prompts there that you could potentially use. And it just takes the kind of thinking process out of it, or the kind of back and forth that you sometimes have with AI, where you're like, no, that's actually not the output I want, actually, and having to constantly do that. So yeah, creating a prompt bank is something I definitely recommend to teams, to take out the manual effort of it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's definitely some things that you might not even have thought of yourself, but looking at it, you're like, wait, that's such a good way of saving time. Like one thing I've always found with AI, using things like ChatGPT, is that you'll ask it to rewrite something or give you an introduction or whatever it might be, and the language is so pretentious. I can never quite put my finger on the word to describe it, but it just doesn't sound right. Like no one actually speaks like that, or they haven't for the last 100 years. And a really nice way of getting around that is by asking it to, giving it a scale of 1 to 10. Because if you say, oh, can you make it more casual, it starts saying, yo, dude, here's an article on, and it's like, whoa, that's way too far. But when you give it a scale of 1 to 10, saying 1 is the least form or 10 is the most, and then going up incrementally, like I want it to be a 4, I want it to be a 6, then that can be a much more specific way of landing on the exact tone that you want, rather than vague descriptions. And that's something I never would have figured out just off the top of my head. I saw it somewhere, and now I use that all the time. So
for sure,
it's nice to have that knowledge sharing hub.
Definitely. And on that as well, if you don't necessarily want to spend all the time kind of going back and forth, there are loads of really useful AI tools out there. So we created one a year or 2 years ago maybe now, called Headline Grabber, which kind of describes what I've just set out and use AI for. Is just you can pick the sentiment of the headline that you want and what type of publication it's going to, and it would just rephrase it for you. Same with Ahrefs, they have quite a few different writing tools. So again, it kind of takes out the fact that you have to prompt it because it's already built in as a bit of a prompt. That's what it's programmed to do. So that can also be something really useful to use if you're not so confident with prompting and knowing when to start with, like building a prompt bank and things like that.
Very nice. I think we're just about wrapping up. And there's one little segment that I like to do in all of my podcasts that you are also subject to. There's no escaping it. And it's digital PR, this or that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two options. Go with your gut. You don't have to explain it. So far, pretty much everyone I've asked has had to explain at least one of them. I don't know why, but you'll get the hang of this pretty quickly. Okay, quick fire. So let's just power through them. The first one is reactive or campaign PR.
Campaign.
Campaign.
Morning or afternoon outreach.
Morning.
Morning.
Moz or Ahrefs.
Ahrefs.
Same.
Yeah.
Bulk send or send individually.
Bulk send every time.
Bulk send with parameters.
Parameters, yeah. But it just saves
a careful
so much time.
bulk.
A careful bulk.
A careful bulk.
I'll take my enthusiasm down. Bulk list, but with lots of checking to make sure that outreaches aren't overlapping.
Response source or Rocks Hill.
Probably Rocks Hill, just because I've got more international clients now. So I'm doing a lot of US outreach, whereas Response Source is primarily UK focused.
I was always Response Source. I was Gorkana back in the day.
New contender.
Yeah.
Gorkana.
I'm not on them as often as I used to be. But
Yeah.
We'll leave it there.
Final one, inspired by our previous conversation. Snog, marry, avoid. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini.
I think I would marry Claude just because it's so polite and it prompts you with different questions back. And I just think for old time's sake, snog ChatGPT and avoid Google Gemini.
Out of context, that's just such an obscure phrase. Someone just tuned in.
Yeah.
Snog ChatGPT.
Snog ChatGPT.
What if I just pick one? Then
What?
then your answer looks dead weird.
Yeah.
Chloe just said this or that.
We're just saying, what do you prefer? ChatGPT. I'm loyal to ChatGPT.
Fair enough. If it ain't broke, they got in there first. Got to respect that.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
As always, I'll put all of the details to the white paper that we've discussed today, as well as Chloe and Matt's LinkedIn profiles in the description, where you'll also have all the details for following Distinctly, myself, and also the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever it is that you listen to your podcast so you can catch our next episode, and stay tuned for more.